Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the session and happy Thanksgiving. And thank you for hanging around and sticking with us as we continue this journey of the Sales and Pre-Sales Mastery series. And today, Piyusha is going to cover all about the SOWs and the handover processes. Piyusha, I won't take much time. I will let you take it over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ravi. As you all know, we are on day 6 of the series. So far, we have covered everything from lead generation to qualification to discovery and requirement gathering. We also talked about POC, POE, and how they impact the sales pipeline, and also estimations, budgets, and pricing. And today we are going to talk about a really interesting topic that is SOW and the handover process. So, as you all know, I'm Piyusha. I'm Solution Architect at Implementology. In the Salesforce ecosystem, we often talk about the solutioning, delivery excellence, customer success, but there's one thing which we often overlook, or a lot of time it's rushed or treated as a formality, and that is statement of work. And also, second portion, which was followed by this, closely followed by this, is handover between the sales and delivery team. But the interesting bit is that your sales team can sell things with to the T, but if the SOW and delivery is not done properly, you're not setting your team for success, rather for the failure. And before even everything begins, you are making sure that the client is not going to come back to you. Within the sales cycle, SOW is a really important document because it essentially acts as a blueprint. It sets the expectation. It is the safety net which everyone involved is looking for. And also the second bit, the handover isn't just a meeting. It's a bridge that connects everything, what sales has promised. Because a lot of time when people are selling, they're like, yeah, we can do this, we can do that, and everything. They will say yes to anything and everything. Type in the chat section if you have faced this issue, because your sales team will say yes to everything, and when you guys are delivering, you realize that this is not something possible within this time frame or within this budget, and so on and so forth. And those are the kind of misalignments which happen. And then we need to do a lot of rework. Then we get a lot of escalations and a ton of unnecessary stress. So in today's session, we're going to talk about what an SOW is, why it's the most important paperwork of the entire project cycle, how a strong SOW protects both the customer and the delivery team. And then we're going to talk about what makes a great sales to delivery handover. We're also going to talk about some common pitfalls and how you can avoid them, and some best practices to improve your delivery outcomes and customer satisfaction. Whether you are in sales or delivery or project management or leadership, this conversation is super important, because getting the SOW and handover right, it really sets the tone for the entire customer journey. So by the end of today's presentation, we all will walk away with a clear understanding of how to strengthen these early project stages, the pre-sales and things like that. And every engagement will start with clarity, alignment, and you will feel a lot more confident while you're delivering the project. So let's get started. the very first thing is the importance of SOW. And you might see that we are actually not talking about what an SOW is in the very first slide, but we're talking about the importance of SOW. And the reason behind that is because the thing is, if you understand the importance of SOW, you will be much more inclined towards, learning more about what an SOW is. So, as I said before, majority of the projects don't fail because of development issues. They actually fail because of mismatched expectation, because your sales team or pre-sales team have promised something which is difficult to deliver in the time frame and the budget. The rework is happening because client is saying that this is something which I want. I recently faced a challenge a few months ago, not very recently, where the pre-sales team actually added something in the SOW, and when we started doing the discovery, what we came up with was that sales team and pre-sales team have said yes to everything, essentially to building an entire new system when the client is deprecating a system. And nowhere in SOW this was mentioned. So when we started planning for discovery, we never talked about that particular portion. We talked about the things which we felt are important as per the SOW. And the client, after a couple of days, went so ballistic. He was not sure as to what we are doing and why we are wasting their time, because their system is retiring in a month and a half, and we're talking about things which can be dealt with later. And then I was like, nowhere in SOW it's mentioned. And they're like, we asked your pre-sales team and your sales team, and they agreed to it, and they said yes to everything. Then one of our sales team member, they went through the transcript and they realized that this was something which they promised, but nobody bothered to share it with us, or nobody bothered to add it in the SOW either, which means that we lost the trust of the client, because as per them, we were we were supposed to do something, and now we're refusing to do that because we agreed on it, even though it's not mentioned in the SOW. So forget about delivering the product with a 5-star rating. It's like they're so frustrated, even at the discovery stage, that they're not even responding to our queries properly. And all of that can be avoided if we have an effective SOW and keeping a track of everything and doing the handover process properly. Now, with that in mind, let's learn what an SOW really is. So just to make sure, don't think of SOW as just a paperwork. It's the foundational agreement that defines exactly what we're doing, and just as importantly, what we're not doing. It doesn't just talk about all the things we're going to do, it also covers what we're not doing. It is there to protect both the customer and the delivery team, because documenting scope clearly, responsibilities, and boundaries, it is essentially going to help the client build the trust with our team. And we will be setting our team for success because they know exactly what they need to do and what don't. They can say no when somebody asks them to do some things which are listed as that this is something we're not doing in an SOW. When SOWs are done properly, it makes sure that all the misunderstandings doesn't exist, or it essentially helps in preventing the misunderstandings and helping everyone start on the same page. So let's talk about anatomy of strong SOW. There are a few things which every SOW should have. The very first one being scope. The scope actually defines very clear project boundaries. It talks about what's included, what's not included, where we're going to focus all of our delivery efforts. It talks about very clearly what is excluded, because a lot of time client will come and they'll be like, hey, can you do this? And it's mentioned as this is not something we're going to cover in our SOW. And we can go back and we can refer that, hey, this is something we mentioned in the SOW that we are not going to do that. And I had a very clear example of this. Our client, I'm sorry about the background noise. I literally can't do anything about it. I live in a city center, and these are the disadvantages of living in a city center in India. Because it's the wedding season, I have very loud music going on behind me. So really sorry about that.
No worries, Piyusha. We can barely hear that, so you're good.
Perfect. If you can't hear that, that is really amazing. Thank you so much for clarifying that. A very clear example which I faced was when our sales team actually signed an SOW with a company, which is called Acme Tools, by the way. And it's a real company, a legit company who runs on Commerce Cloud, Marketing Cloud, and Sales and Service Cloud. They were Horizontal's customer. And when I was working with Horizontal Digital, I was working with their marketing team. And they actually requested some weird things from us, like doing the graphic designing for emails. As a Marketing Cloud consultant or as a Marketing Cloud developer in our team members, like nobody was trained to be a graphic designer. And this request was clearly something which was out of SOW. We never mentioned it in the SOW that we will be doing graphic designing, but in the SOW is nowhere mentioned that we're not going to do graphic designing either. So even though we were not saying that we are going to, we only mentioned like what we are going to do, that we can help them with journeys, building emails, refining their journeys, and so on and so forth, building automations, but nowhere we mention that things outside of this are considered out of scope. And that actually became a real issue for us because they came back and they're like, but we want you to do that. And our team was like, we can't do that. And they're like, we actually hired your team because we want them to do everything, not like half of it. And so this became like a point of contention. After a while, we were able to resolve the issue, but we lost the client's trust. And so once the contract ended, they actually never came back to us because the trust was not there in the very first thing, because they mentioned this in the pre-sales call and our team agreed to it. We can't actually bring graphic designers out of thin air. We can't actually do things which are out of scope because we need to get billed for all of those things, right? So just adding assumptions, it actually brings disaster to the projects. So assumptions and dependencies are something which brings a lot of risks. So make sure whenever you're working on the SOW, never assume. If you have a doubt, always go back to the client and check if something is amiss, if this is exactly what they're looking for or they're looking for something else. Now, the next thing is RACI, and it's really, really important because identifying who is responsible for what and who's accountable for what actually helps. Because with one of our clients, they took 3 weeks to get our team setup done. Now, for those 3 weeks, as per our allocations, the project team is allocated on the project, they're ready to go. It's a business loss for those 3 weeks if the client is dealing the project. So they need to take accountability for this. And how we can make them accountable for this is if we have a clear RACI in place. If we have a RACI in place, we can say that, hey, you were responsible for this and the project delayed because of this. the timeline is going to get extended, but also the budget is going to extend because of this. And so if the clients are US based, they normally pay for it, being very honest here. If the clients are Middle East based, they will say something like, it is what it is. We're not going to pay you for these 3 weeks, but at least you have something in place to protect yourself. But I'm being very honest here. I shouldn't have said that. But this is what it is. In any case, the next thing is timeline, and it is very crucial. Why it is crucial is because you need to adhere to a timeline. You are allocating your team on the project to do something. If they're not able to do it in time, it becomes tricky because you might be doing in other projects as well. If you're allocating maybe say 10 people on a project and you're not like stretching the project over and over, your budget's going to go haywire. Your client will get frustrated because they ask something to be delivered in 10 weeks and now you're taking 15 weeks and it's not acceptable to them. So clear timelines, and a very important thing, milestones. Make sure you have clear milestones and payment terms, because a lot of time I've seen people just adding, especially people who are very new and starting their companies from the scratch or maybe freelancing. They will simply just say that I will bill at the end of the project, and oftentimes client will either make them wait for like months before they pay them, or sometimes they even disappear, and it's a reality which you have to accept. So what you can do is you can have clear milestones or payment terms. You can add that once the setup is done, I will get 10% payment. Once this is done, 25%. Once this is done, further 15%, and so on and so forth. It doesn't necessarily have to be 10% at every milestone. Depending on how big or small the milestones are, you can figure out and you can probably put it there. Always make sure you go with the milestone-based pricing versus, oh, we will bill you at the end of the project, which is never recommended. That's how all the big agencies bill as well. They don't bill towards the end of the year. They bill either, if it's a retainer project, they bill on a monthly basis. If it's a huge project or like a one-time project, they will bill on milestone basis. There's one more thing which you all should be aware of: the process to request change and risk. Always make sure you add CR process, because we live in the agile world and the client might have some request where they want you to be flexible with some things. In your SOW, you might write something, but then once we start working on the project, clients sometimes feel like, okay, we need to probably change something. And then you can be like, okay, we can do that. You can raise a change order for that and change request for that, and we'll be able to fit it in the same time, or maybe we probably need to bill you additional for that, depending on how your relationships are, what the project size is. Sometimes we adjust smaller change requests for free. Sometimes for bigger change requests, we can charge them. So totally depending on the project and the requests you are getting, but those are also some things which you should add in the SOW. If any one of these sections is unclear or missing, you can for sure expect issues later in your project cycle. Now, let's talk about, okay, some more things. So I actually covered a few of these already. The pricing, make sure you clearly set expectations around pricing. You also talk about any risk, because a lot of time migration and other bits and pieces do incur some risk. And sometimes when you're deploying something, things happen, so make sure you are talking about identifying the risk beforehand as well. Sometimes you feel like, oh, the setup is going to take time because you're just purchasing your license from Salesforce, and this process might take like 2 more weeks. Or sometimes, for example, you are setting up SMS for your client, specifically for Middle Eastern clients. normally takes about 4 weeks to get approval from government to get your SMS approved, like number approved, so on and so forth, which we realized later because we raised that request and it took us ages before we were able to enable those journeys because we started the process a bit late. We should have started it at the beginning of the project. But those are the things you learn. But once you've learned those, try to put those in the risk, with which you can make sure that the client is aligned if something like that happens, what they need to do. And then we talked about deliverables. You can also talk about like quality standards, if this is what you are going to offer them very clearly, and then change management, like how they can request for change, or how they can go with the CR, like change requests, and finally the review process. What will be the done definition of done? Who will give a go ahead? Because sometimes you'll say, I'm going to deliver this. You have delivered this from your end, but the client is not approving. So you need to also talk about the review process, who will approve it, and how it will be called done from both ends. Now, let's talk about some of the common mistakes which people do in SOWs. The very first one being is very vague scope. And I've seen that happening, and I'm not lying when people say, we're going to implement Salesforce. Well, dude, what are you going to do in Salesforce? Are you going to implement Salesforce, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud? What exactly are you doing when you're saying we are implementing Salesforce in your
You're breaking up, Piyusha.
defined scope actually leads to
Piyusha, if you can hear me, you're breaking up. Can you repeat from the past 1 minute or so?
okay. I actually talked about I audible now.
It's breaking still.
Okay.
It's on and off actually.
I actually haven't changed anything, so I'm actually not sure what I need to do. I just have like
I
a
know.
background noise, so
Yeah,
I'm really sorry about that.
we can hear the noise though, but yeah, it's on and off. I know we can't do much about it. Please continue. I might have to stop you again if it is breaking. Thank you.
Okay. Let me actually close some of the additional
Windows. Okay.
yes, windows from my computer, and then I'll be able to maybe do a bit better. Let me stop sharing, and then I'll come back.
Okay. In the meantime, everyone, I believe you are getting some value out of these sessions. We try to put in the best content with the best speakers, so your time is well spent. If you have any feedback, please do share with us, or any other topics that you want to see covered, let us know.
Is it better now?
You continue, Piyusha, we'll see.
Okay, perfect. Um, awesome. So I talked about wake scope and how actually these wake scopes turn into project horror stories. I talked about how I've seen people adding implement Salesforce as a really vague scope statement. And then I was talking about how missing assumption actually leads to like bigger issues as well, because they sometimes become blocker later. You might add assumption. You might actually just and not write it properly or formally check with the client, and then that will become a bigger issue later on. No customer's responsibility. A lot of time, this can cause delays because accountability problem is a bigger problem. If they're not supporting you with the discovery, if they're not supporting you with enabling your team to set up on their org, your team will not be able to start, because some clients, I've worked with a couple of clients in the health sector, and they have very stringent requirements around doing the background checks, and they might be in a rush. They want you to get started, but unless their background verification is done for all the team members who are working on the project, they will never start it. So having clear accountability, that's where we mentioned RACI, having those accountability mentioned for customers, for your team, for everyone, actually helps you keep everything on track. Sometimes it is no change request process, because if you are not establishing a process for this, scope creep happens, because client will say that I want to do this, whether it's in your scope or not, I don't care, but I need this. You can avoid these by pointing them towards your CR request process. Then we have the over-promising sales team. So make sure that the sales commitment, if they don't match the delivery capacity, do not set that expectation for your client, because sales team does that very often, and I've seen that happening almost every time. And I have to go back to them and tell them that this is not something which is possible. I remember one time very clearly when I was working on a marketing cloud project, and the customer was also using education cloud, and nobody, and I'm telling you, nobody in our team was trained on education cloud, and the client wanted us to do something there. And this was during a pre-sales process, and the sales team said, yeah, sure, why not? We can do that. We are a Salesforce shop. And I was like, no, hold on, no, we don't have anyone with education cloud experience. And they're like, why are you, doing that? We could have won that account, like additional deal as well. And I was like, we don't have anyone with that experience. And we had an argument after our client call, because they wanted to say yes so badly, because they could have added that additional 100K in their sales books. But I said, no, the reason behind that is and they said, oh, you can probably learn it in a week. And that's not how it works. I can't learn it off of PLC or Trailhead and execute a project based on that. So you need to be very clear with your sales team as to what your team can deliver and what you can't. Because as a Salesforce talent or trailblazer, when you're working with your sales team, you need to make sure you are aware of what your team can deliver and what they can't. So identifying all of these mistakes early can actually save you so much of unnecessary escalations you're going to get later. So always make sure you identify them as early as possible. Now, we will talk about some really important things, and that covers the importance of handover, which is the second portion of our topic. A lot of time, we have sold the deal. Now, sales team is relaxed because they don't have to worry about anything. They have received accolades from everyone in the team for selling this account. And now comes the important part, because your team has to do the delivery process. In majority of the companies, I've seen this as a formality, where even though they have a strong SOW, they have an extremely weak or poor handover process. They will probably just pass on hey, this is what we're doing, and that's it. But that's not how it works. Handover is a really key sales transfer process, I'll say. So you pass on all the context you have gained during pre-sales or sales process, not just a document, but everything, your meeting transcripts, your notes, your knowledge about that account and the project, and then you pass it on to the team. It helps your delivery team understand customer goals. It helps them understand sensitivities and risk because you have been interacting with the client for a very long time. And now your delivery team will come in and they will be interacting for the very first time. So by now, you probably have an idea as to how your client will react to certain situations. So you can tell your team about those, and you can also set expectations as to what they will be looking forward to. Now, the next bit is, the thing is, like, when this is skipped or rushed, the delivery team actually ends up guessing a lot of the things, which then leads to misalignment. Whereas a proper handover creates a flow or like a continuity between the delivery team and the sales team, and your client never feels that after the sales process they have been passed on to somebody else. They normally feels like, okay, they're still working with the people they've been interacting with for a long time. So what a good handover should include? Well, a good handover should include a very clear signed SOW, a proposal, discovery notes, any success metrics which client has talked about during the sales process, and all the risks you have identified so far, technical or integration details, the stakeholder map, all of these information, they help delivery team anticipate challenges early and plan effectively. A good handover should always enable the delivery team to start without having to rediscover the basics, not let them for failure, even at the beginning. With that, I just need 30 seconds to unlock the door because because somebody's at the door, so I'll be back in 30 seconds, exactly 30 seconds. Sorry.
I realized I haven't started the Q&A. I'm going to start it now. Um, any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. If you have already posted anything in the chat, please copy it over to the Q&A section so we don't miss those.
Awesome. With this, I'm back. Thank you so much, JB. And I'm really sorry once again. But these are all the things which you need for a good handover. If you have all of these, your team will actually thank you because they will know each and every detail even before they jump into the project. Now, let's talk about some of the best practices. What a good handover actually talks about. They talk about stakeholder identification because during the sales process, you all have met the stakeholders several times. So when you're doing the handover, you normally have a clear document of the name, person, their quirks sometimes, and all the things they can help the delivery team with, so that every time they have an issue, they know who to reach out to. Next up is communication plan. You know, when you are adding this in delivery handover, and this is something which majority of the teams actually overlook. If you're having a communication strategy to keep all the stakeholders engaged, informed, you are getting into a zone where that client is most likely to work with you for longer duration, because majority of the time we just work with the team members who are engaged for the time duration of the project, and we forget about the main key stakeholders who we tapped on while we were in the pre-sale cycle. If we are using a communication strategy to keep all of those stakeholders informed during the delivery handover, your team knows who to inform when and what they can talk about. They also have a responsibility matrix, which talks about what the client is responsible for and what our team is responsible for. Then we have a feedback mechanism as to how you can actually implement clients' feedback and internal feedback as well to improve the collaboration. And lastly, success metrics. How the project success will look like, what are the metrics we need to look after, and so on and so forth. And now we're going to talk about how the handover meeting is structured. In the handover meeting, we normally start with kickoff, where all participants go through the project objectives and goals. And then we do the SOW walkthrough. SOW is a detailed document. We review the SOW details. We talk about what is in our scope, what is our scope, what we're going to deliver, and how, because sometimes we deliver with hybrid teams, some onshore and some offshore teams. Sometimes we deliver with 100% offshore teams, so on and so forth. So all those details, what time zones we have to cover, what we have to do when SLA is 2 hours, because we are not going to be available 24/7, and sales team have sold that. So we actually go through all those details here, and sometimes we request for a change at this stage as well. Then we review the risk. We identify potential risk and try to figure out mitigation strategies so that we don't get into that situation ever. And then we do the technical review, where technical team confirms that all the implementation plans are doable, everything we're doing looks good, and they just give a go ahead. On the other hand, the expectations for the handover meeting is to review all the goals and expectations thoroughly, make sure everyone is aligned on their roles and responsibility for delivery, and to confirm or double check, I'll say, because you normally confirm these before signing SOW. So just to like double check the timelines, next steps for execution is clear to everyone. And then we do a wrap up with key takeaways and normally a bunch of questions, because pre-sales team have been interacting with the client for a long time, and now it's delivery team's turn and they don't know anything about the client. So this is their opportunity to ask questions and get their doubts cleared through this process. I normally try to include client pictures as well in here when I'm talking about like who they are, what they do, and so on and so forth, so that my team knows exactly who they're interacting with even before they get on their very first call. Because a lot of time developers and QAs and all of these people, they don't get the opportunity to interact with the client directly. So for them, it is a good opportunity to actually get to know the faces. If they're on a call once, they will be able to interact with them, but they will know who these people are. Now let's talk about the best practices for SOWs and handovers. For SOWs, if you follow these best practices, you will be able to see that this kind of consistency actually produces amazing outcomes, and your team will actually thank you for all of these things. The very first thing being, always include delivery team into the sales cycle as early as possible, even for a short duration. And why am I saying this is because if your delivery team is included, if your delivery team leads are included, obviously you can't include everyone there. You will know what is possible in that time frame. They will be able to clear your doubts as to whatever you're promising yes to, whether that's possible or not. Once you start doing the few projects, you will be obviously able to refine your SOW template. So make sure you standardize it after a while, because that consistency obviously will give you that edge. After a few projects, you get to a level where you know that, okay, this is something which is possible. This is something which is not possible. This is something which we missed last time, and this is something which we need to add now. Next up is scope. And this is very, very, very important. I can't say enough times for this. Make sure the scope language is always measurable and unambiguous, because any ambiguity in the scope will lead to misinterpretation, and you will be in that weird spiral where you don't know what you're doing. Next is documenting everything. Make sure you document every expectation, even the verbal ones. Because as I said, sometimes sales team will say yes, and client will think that, okay, they will do it because they said yes, even though it's not in the SOW. Don't do that, because then you are losing your client's trust. And it's very important as a pre-sales person to make sure you document all those things. Sometimes you play the bad cop with your sales team because you say no to things which they don't like to hear. And then the last one is realistic timelines. Make sure, always make sure that the timelines are achievable and they are there to manage clients' expectation as well. All of these things look very small as of now, but they actually, putting together all of these, they create a massive difference in predictability and in the project outcomes, and also your relationship with your client. So make sure you follow these best practices. And now we're going to talk about some red flags. Who likes red flags? Alrighty. So in terms of red flags, there are a few which, when I was talking about best practices, I kind of covered a bunch of them. But just to say, unrealistic timelines that are driven by budget rather than efforts, they always make sure that your team is going to fail. The client is going to be dissatisfied. So make sure you look out for these early warning signs. You look out for vague integration details. Sometimes you'll just say, oh, we're going to do this, because it does not define. You get into that zone of the gray area to do that, but no, this is not possible in this time and budget. Not sure if they can give it to you on time, and it's kind of like delaying the project. You don't know. You could have identified that in the early stages and saved your trouble. Scope ambiguity. We talked about this so many times so far. In a sales cycle, when customer was promised something that isn't in the SOW, is going to lead to misaligned expectation and project overruns. Overpromising, obviously, is something which sales team does, and you need to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're putting it in SOW. You're not overpromising anything which isn't possible. If you are able to identify these red flags while your sales team is pushing to get their SOW signed and stop them from doing any and all of these mistakes, you can actually avoid a lot of the escalations and troubles for yourself and for your team later. Now, we're almost there. So the almost last thing we're going to talk about today is the impact of getting everything right. When we do the SOW properly and the handover is done in the perfect way, the project actually feels completely different. And I've seen that happening not many times. I hate to admit this, because majority of the time something is not right. Because salespeople honestly are pretty greedy, and they want to do things where they can just get a yes from the client. So they will say yes to anything, and that becomes an issue later. But if the SOW and the handover and everything is done right, your pre-sales team is taking charge of everything, not letting the sales team run all over them, you will see that the project delivery becomes so smooth and predictable that the timeline and budget are always met. The trust with your client is off the charts because your customer feels informed, they feel supported.
Piyusha, you're not audible again. I think she is signing up again, so logging in again. Let me check and then pull her in. So, how many of you have been attending from the day one? Each and every session, the live session. How many? Give me a thumbs up or send me a message in the chat. Wonderful. So many. I'm so glad to see regular attendees.
Delivery.
Piyusha,
So
I see you're
probably
back. You can continue. Oh,
sorry.
Piyusha, were you talking all the time before?
Yes.
We lost you in between, and then I see you came back.
Oh
So I
wow.
think you may
Okay.
need to go back a slide or two and then repeat it again. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. Where was I when I um
Uh,
was it
yeah,
clear?
the red flags. Yeah,
Okay. So we covered red flags, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just talk about the impact once again. I'm really sorry. Okay, now I can see a lot of the messages. I think it was my internet. Okay, so I actually talked about the impact of getting it all right. When the SOW and the handover is done properly, everything which follows these two, or I will say the downstream, becomes so much easier because the delivery becomes so predictable. You know that you're going to meet the timelines and the budget. The trust from your client team goes through the roof because you're keeping them informed at every step. Your customer trusts you more because the expectations are very clear. They know what they're looking for. You will see very few escalations or zero escalations. I've never seen that happening, but like fewer escalations is what I'll be happy with. Very few change orders or very few surprises. And the team obviously have better margins. You see improved communication between your internal team as well as your client. And you see increased efficiency of the team as well, because people are not actually trying to shift blame, but they're focusing on delivering the best outcome they can. The team feels really positive about everything, so the morale is boosted. And this essentially leads to a successful project delivery, and your client essentially feels very confident and satisfied. And this, I feel, is the foundation for long-term success. So if you do all these things properly, you get clarity, you are protecting your team and yourself, you make sure that the continuity happens and your team delivers a successful project, and your client is always, always happy with this. That's all from my end. If you all have any questions, we can take up some questions. If not, we can actually go through the 2 questions, which can then get you all some vouchers. Hassan, to your question, all these recordings will be available on the Global Bootcamp channel.
Thanks, Piyusha. Now the question of the day. Can you please post the question?
Yes. So what is the primary purpose of SOW?
That was so quick.
Okay. Yes. Belief was the quickest one. You are absolutely correct. To clearly define scope, responsibilities, and expectations for the project.
Could you please share with us or with me your email ID? I'm sharing mine. So in case after the session, you can get back to me on this email ID.
Perfect. And for the virtual audience, should I display the question, JB?
Yes, Piyusha, please go ahead.
I'm not going to display the answer for that one, just the question.
Yes.
Perfect. And so if you are watching us online, this is the question which you need to answer. Which of the following should always be included in a sales to delivery handover?
Okay, we're not going to reveal the answer in this session because
Yes.
this is for the people who are watching the recording and sending the email for that.
Yeah.
Any questions, everyone? Let us know. We still have a few minutes left. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat or please feel free to unmute yourself and then ask the question directly. So I don't see any other questions. Piyusha,
Yeah, me neither, actually.
oh, you see one?
No, I don't see any questions either.
Okay.
If you
So
have any
thanks.
questions later, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can drop JB a note, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. The next and the last part of the series is on Tuesday. If you guys have a ton of questions, maybe JB and all of us can organize maybe one Q&A session dedicatedly. But if you don't have that, I don't see a point in doing that. So that's it from my end.
Yeah. Thanks, Piyusha, and thanks everyone for continuing the learning journey with us. Any other questions you have, please feel free to reach out to Piyusha or myself, or you can also post it in the Slack channel. We have the Slack channel created, the sales and pre-sales. So you can post your questions or any other feedback in that channel. And we have one last session. Hopefully that would be the last. If you have any questions, as Piyusha mentioned, or you want anything else to be covered, we would facilitate another one, but the one on December 2nd would be the last. Thank you and congratulations, Kuldeep. And we have one more opportunity to win a voucher. That's the next week. And we hope to see you again in the next session. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.